For the stability of the EU integration process, two things are most important, I would say. One is to establish a proper institutional setting for the coordination of the EU accession process, especially bearing in mind that this process is sometimes a lengthy process. It takes the lifetime of a couple of governments. So you need to have a good coordination structure which is going to be capable of sustaining the pressure of different challenges in your EU integration path. The second most important thing for the stability of the EU accession negotiations is to have a plan. Without a plan, it is very difficult to work anything that you do in your life. And bearing in mind that the EU integration process or accession to the EU is one of the most complex and most complicated exercises in the life of a nation, if you wish, not only of the government, it is clear that without a plan, your chances to be successful at the end of the accession process are significantly lower. What I refer to a plan is a plan of what are your strategic goals in specific areas, different policies of your countries, who are going to be the major actors in different areas of alignment of the EU acquis. How long do you think that your internal reforms will have to last before fulfilling the EU accession requirements? How much money will that exercise require? Where this money will come from? Whether this is going to be your own budgetary resources, whether Ukraine is going to have to revert to some loans of international financial institutions, or how to absorb the EU integration facilities, different funds which are established to help you in the EU accession process. So these are all components that needs to be fit into one strategic plan that is one of the must, if you ask me, in the EU integration process, if you want to have a stable and sustainable process. If I was asked what are the major aspects that Ukraine needs to focus at this moment, I would say that these are the fundamentals as described in the cluster 1 of the EU. There are a couple of major components of elements of this cluster. First, the issue concerning the rule of law. Second, this is a public administration reform, which is just a second side of the same medal of the rule of law. And obviously, functioning of democratic institutions. And let me be very clear about the importance of these issues. These are not just your European obligations or European requirements. This should be declared as a Kiev criteria, as a Ukrainian plan, how to create Ukraine as a modern, well-functioning democratic country which is going to be welcomed among the EU member states without a shadow of a doubt that Ukraine is prepared to take over the obligations which are deriving from the EU membership. Why these aspects, why these elements are important? Well, you're entering a club that functions in accordance with its own rules and procedures. And in a time of a crisis, and we are living in a perpetual time of crisis ever since 2008 and the economic crisis, which later evolved in Brexit, in migration crisis, in wars in European environment, the price of internal coherence and internal cohesion became very high. So all those who are not ready to respect the rules, the values, the procedures within the EU are certainly going to have a much more difficult way to the EU than those who decide to respect these requirements, to prepare well-functioning democratic institutions, to prepare professional, integrity-based public administration which is capable of understanding the EU rules and procedures and implementing them in the Ukrainian case, and those who have a properly functioning courts and judges who are educated in order to secure that European laws which are going to be applied in Ukraine are actually enforced in the case that somebody failed to implement these obligations. We need to understand what are the negotiations with the EU. You're not negotiating the substance. The substance is the EU rules, regulations, and every country, not only Ukraine, but every country that joins the EU needs to adopt this body of legislation and implement it on its own territory. So if there is a clear political commitment and unambiguous political will that Ukraine wants to become an EU member as soon as possible, then this should be a framework for the internal negotiations. The real negotiations are happening in Kiev, in other countries, in other cities throughout the country. There you're negotiating with what we call stakeholders, those whose interests are going to be affected by Ukraine's accession to the EU. You're negotiating with your industries, with your farmers, with your plumbers, with your bankers. This is the area where negotiations are actually taking place. And if you frame this discussion in this framework, that Ukraine wants to become a next EU member as soon as possible, then you need to develop a proper terminology and communication campaign of how to present all the benefits, but also those costs of the EU accession process. So it's not only about benefits. There will be some costs, but these costs needs to be framed as investments for the faster accession of Ukraine to the EU and to a future of the country within the EU. When everybody understands that as an investment, not as a loss, not to consider themselves as a loser, but rather to see that this is a sound investment for the future of this country, then these internal negotiations are going to be much easier. And as regarding transitional periods, yes, you can negotiate it, but you need to have a plan. You need to know who is going to do what, in which time period, and with what money. Mm-hmm. If you present your case to the European Commission in that fashion, then European Commission is becoming your advocate, and they will then talk to the member states because you're negotiating with the member states, not with the Commission. Commission is just representative of the 27 member states. They are going to take your role and they're going to negotiate with the member states saying, Ukraine is a serious country. They presented us a serious plan, which is feasible. We trust them. So please, let's discuss how to help Ukraine and how to extend the potential transitional periods. Well, if you ask me what to do, the three things would be plan, coordinate yourself, and get everybody on board. Mm-hmm. It's not only the government that accedes to the EU, it's not only Verkhovna Rada that goes to EU, it's each and every member of Ukrainian society. And each and every member of Ukrainian society needs to be aware of that fact. Nobody's going to be left aside. They need to be informed properly, obviously. They need to be included through the role of the civil society. There are these two famous principles upon which negotiations are taking place. One is inclusiveness and the other is transparency. Mm-hmm. Why? Because you need to include representatives of a broader society. And those who care about the common good are usually civil society organizations. This is why their role is extremely important in the process. And they can, in cooperation with the government, obviously, in the way that you decide how to cooperate with the government, they can then inform the public about the aspects of the EU integration process and in that sense increase the transparency of the process itself. Three don'ts would be do not try to portray situation in Ukraine better than it is, because it is a useless exercise. European Commission knows you better than you know yourself. They have reports back in years and they're following each and every portfolio So they are very much aware of the situation in the country. That will only undermine the trust that is crucial for this exercise. And it will also hamper your potential requests for more money, because they will say, why are you asking us for more money? You said that you're perfect in the policy X, Y, Z, no matter what. Another don't would be don't over-politicize the process. Process is political, to be very honest. Those who are saying that there are technical and political aspects of the process are wrong. Every decision on every single standard, technical standard, is a political decision. Because behind that, there are additional costs or investments for particular groups in your society, and they are going to be very political about it. So, well, why should we go this way? Why don't we go the other way? It's going to be cheaper for us. No, maybe it's going to be cheaper for you, but for the society as a whole, it might bear a significant cost. So politics needs to focus, and the politicians need to create a national consensus on importance of Ukraine's EU accession to the EU. They're very much welcome. They're the owners of the process. They need to respond to their voters, obviously. They need to provide legitimacy to the process. But please be careful not to over-politicize the process, because according to our experience in the Western Balkans, that can be very detrimental to the process itself.